Hi, I'm Dr. Brian Thornburg, and I wanted to review the facts around the passing of this 6-year-old little girl who passed away from measles. The medical records have been made available, and some very esteemed physicians have reviewed these medical records. The first thing I want to say is that my heart goes out to this family. I hope that they are finding the privacy and dignity that they can find after the passing of a loved little child. And unfortunately, there's national attention and spotlight on this family given the current measles outbreak. So I hope that they are finding the appropriate peace that they need at this time to process what's happened. And returning back to the medical records for this little girl, this child had measles and was in the recovery phase of measles, and then developed a secondary pneumonia, which is a common complication from measles, and was brought to the hospital. Because the child had measles earlier that week or the week before, the hospital implemented a measles pneumonia protocol, because the pneumonia that develops with measles is different than the pneumonia that occurs with a community-acquired pneumonia. And so, given that this child had measles, they went ahead with a different selection of antibiotics than would have been used if the child came in without a case of the measles and was just a community-acquired pneumonia that required hospitalization. The antibiotics that were given to this little girl initially were ceftriaxone, which is the appropriate antibiotic, and vancomycin. Vancomycin was picked again because the physicians thought that this was a measles-type pneumonia and not a community-acquired type pneumonia. Once they obtained cultures, they discovered that this was a community-acquired pneumonia and not a measles complication. So they switched the antibiotics, continued the ceftriaxone, stopped the vancomycin, and then began azithromycin or the Zithromax. Unfortunately, too much time had passed and the little girl couldn't recover even with the change of the antibiotic, and this little girl unfortunately passed away. It was understandable that the physicians selected a measles appropriate complication antibiotic to cover pneumonia. The antibiotic should have been a community-acquired one. Hindsight's 2020. I know some physicians have said that this was malpractice. However, given the national spotlight attention on measles, given that this child was admitted for a pneumonia, had recently had measles, very logical to conclude that this child had a measles type complication. And so unfortunately, the wrong medicine was picked and this little girl tragically passed away. You can see that this was not a measles death. This was a community-acquired pneumonia that was mistreated. This means that we have not had a child die of measles in over 10 years. The last death we had from measles was in 2015 in an immune-compromised adult and not a child. So it has been many, many, many years since a child has passed away from measles. I hope this allays some of the fears that people are having. It doesn't detract from the fact that there can be complications from measles. However, in this case, we still have 0 reported cases of death from measles in well over 10 years. Thank you.